The South China Sea was calm until precisely 6:40 a.m. Out of the haze, a Chinese destroyer cut across the bow of a U.S. Navy guided missile cruiser, forcing an immediate evasive maneuver. For a brief moment, it looked like Beijing was about to score a dangerous symbolic victory. But within seconds, the entire equation shifted. Hidden in the gray morning light, an American weapons system came alive, a system so rarely activated in peacetime that even seasoned analysts were stunned. What happened next wasn't just a tactical checkmate, it was a geopolitical thunderclap. Signals, intelligence, precision targeting, and split-second command decisions merged into a single, irreversible action. Why did Beijing miscalculate so badly? And what unseen hand of American naval doctrine turned a risky standoff into a decisive moment? Do not just watch, be part of the mission. Like, subscribe, and tell us. Was this escalation inevitable or avoidable? The clash was no accident. For months, intelligence intercepts hinted at a deliberate Chinese push to test U.S. Navy resolve in contested waters. Satellite imagery had already shown an unusual surge of PLAN, People's Liberation Army Navy, assets shadowing American patrols. But on this morning, the challenge crossed a line right into internationally recognized navigation lanes. A tense silence filled the Combat Information Center as radar blips closed in. Rules of engagement were clear, yet the margin for error was razor-thin. One wrong move could ignite a regional firestorm. Every sailor aboard knew the world was watching. Would Washington back down or stand firm? Before you judge the next move, tell us, should a single ship bear the weight of an entire nation's credibility? The clock struck 6:45 a.m., and the U.S. Navy guided missile cruiser, USS Antietam, was already at full alert. The Combat Information Center glowed with the soft green of radar scopes, every operator locked in, every eye trained on the incoming Chinese destroyer Type 052 D Luyang 3. She was moving at 19 knots, crossing the cruiser's projected path by just under 2 nautical miles, well inside what naval doctrine considers a hazardous intercept. On the surface, it looked like a test of nerve, but the tactical readouts told a different story. The Chinese vessel had activated its fire control radar, a move that in naval terms is as close to a clenched fist as you can get without throwing a punch. Phase 1. The opening gambit. At 6:47 a.m., the first decisive order rang out from the Antietam's commanding officer. All stations, set Condition 1. Bring Aegis to full combat readiness. Condition 1 meant every weapons system Standard Missile 6 interceptors, Harpoon anti-ship missiles, Phalanx CIWS was manned and primed. In the ship's forward vertical launch system, hatches clicked open in mechanical unison. Even without a single missile fired, the signal was unmistakable. The United States was not here to yield, but there was more at play than meets the eye. Intelligence officers aboard had been running a live data link with USS Ronald Reagan's Air Wing, 40 nautical miles to the east. High above, an E-2D Advanced Hawkeye was feeding encrypted targeting solutions in real time. Phase 2. The Shadow War. Unknown to the Chinese vessel's crew, the Antietam wasn't alone. 2 Arleigh Burke-class destroyers USS Mustin and USS Rafael Peralta were riding silent in electronic emission control, EMCON mode. Their radars cold, their presence invisible on most scopes. This was deliberate. If the planned destroyer fired, the return volley wouldn't just come from one ship, it would come from 3, coordinated through Link 16 and satellite comms. At 6:51 a.m., the Chinese vessel altered course, closing the distance to 1.5 nautical miles. It was an aggressive signal. We are willing to force a maneuver. That's when the Antietam made her own move. Without broadcasting a single radio warning, she initiated a slow turn enough to maintain collision avoidance, but also enough to force the planned vessel to readjust. This was tactical chess, not checkers. Phase 3. Air power joins the board. 6:55 a.m. Overhead, the whine of turbofans broke the tension. 2 FA-18E Super Hornets roared in from the east, their profiles lit against the dawn sky. They were loaded not for an airstrike, but for deterrence aim, 120 AMRAAMs under the wings, electronic countermeasure pods ready to scramble targeting systems. For the Chinese destroyer's captain, this was now a 3-dimensional problem. Engage the cruiser, and you risk air superiority collapsing over your head in seconds. Pull back, and the message to Beijing would be one of retreat. Phase 4. Electronic pressure. At 6:57 a.m., the Aegis system did something subtle but unmistakable. It painted the planned destroyer with its Spy 1 radar in high-resolution tracking mode. This wasn't mere observation, it was a declaration. You are in the fire control loop. Every sailor on both ships knew the implication missiles could be in the air in less than 20 seconds if things turned hot. And yet, the order to fire never came. Why? Because this confrontation was about more than tactical victory. It was about shaping the next decade of Indo-Pacific deterrence. Washington's standing orders were clear. Escalate only if absolutely necessary. Phase 5. The unseen weapon. 7:01 a.m. Without warning, the Chinese destroyer's targeting radar blinked out. No one aboard the Antietam cheered not yet, but the electronic warfare team knew what had happened. A U.S. Navy EA-18 Growler, flying at the edge of detection range, had just flooded the planned ship's sensors with a precisely tuned barrage of jamming signals. No missiles fired, no guns roared. But in electronic warfare, stripping an adversary of targeting capability is as decisive as sinking them. The destroyer, blind and without a firing solution, slowed its approach. Phase 6. The political layer. Even as the ships maneuvered, events were unfolding far beyond the South China Sea. In Washington, the Pentagon's watch officers were already feeding live updates to the National Security Council. In Beijing, the incident was being framed for state media as a routine freedom of navigation encounter, downplaying just how close the plan had come to operational defeat without a shot fired. But the truth? For those in the command chain, this morning had been a live test of not just hardware but nerve. The Aegis system's full-spectrum readiness, the integration of surface, air, and electronic warfare, all had worked seamlessly. Was the U.S. Navy's restraint a masterstroke of deterrence, or a missed opportunity to deliver a clear, final warning? Comment below. Your perspective shapes the debate more than you think. 7:05 a.m. The air was heavy with a strange mix of victory and danger. The Chinese destroyer had slowed, its radar blinded, but no one aboard the USS Antietam relaxed. Naval standoffs have a rhythm, and every seasoned sailor knew. This was the moment when either side might make a reckless move to save face. On the bridge, the captain kept his voice even, but his orders cut like steel. Maintain heading, keep all weapons hot. If they close again, we control the tempo, not them. The message was clear. The U.S. Navy wasn't going to back down, but it also wasn't going to be provoked into firing first. This was the doctrine of calculated dominance, a posture the Chinese captain would have to read and respect. Phase 7. The encirclement begins. 7:07 a.m. A new set of radar returns appeared on the tactical display. Two more planned vessels, smaller Type 56 Ampere corvettes, approaching from the northwest. If the destroyer had been the spearhead, these ships were the shield, attempting to box the Antietam in. But what the Chinese command didn't know was that the American formation was already expanding. From the south, USS Rafael Peralta surfaced on radar, coming in at 20 knots. From the northeast, USS Mustin revealed herself, positioning for a crossing T maneuver, an old naval tactic that allows one ship to bring all its forward guns and missiles to bear, while the enemy can only reply with a fraction of theirs. This wasn't just positioning, it was message delivery. You're surrounded, and we chose the battlefield. Phase 8. Air Dominance Demonstration. 7:10 a.m. The sky roared again. This time it wasn't 2 Hornets, it was 4. They came in low, afterburners shaking the deck, before climbing sharply into a holding pattern. Above them, the E-2D Hawkeye circled like a silent sentinel, its radar umbrella covering hundreds of miles. One of the Hornets executed a simulated attack run, dropping to sea level and accelerating toward the Chinese destroyer before banking away sharply. No weapons were released, but the point was unmistakable. If this had been real, the destroyer would have been hit before it could even issue a counter-command. From the Antietam CIC, electronic warfare officers monitored the planned vessel's communications. Bursts of encrypted chatter indicated a change in orders, likely from higher up the chain of command. The corvettes adjusted course, now keeping a cautious distance of over 4 nautical miles. Phase 9. The counter. Move that never happened. 7:13 a.m. Analysts on both sides would later call this the critical minute. The Chinese destroyer had one final option, a hard turn to starboard to try and cut off the Antietam before the U.S. formation closed the gap, but the risk was enormous. With U.S. ships already inside strike range, and electronic jamming making fire control unreliable, the move could end in disaster. Beijing's doctrine emphasizes calculated risk, but here, the math didn't add up. So instead, the destroyer slowed to 12 knots and held course parallel to the Antietam. In naval diplomacy, that's the equivalent of stepping back from the brink while keeping your sword drawn. Phase 10. Strategic messaging in motion. 7:15 a.m. The Antietam broadcast an open-channel statement, calm, professional, and deliberately audible to every nearby vessel. This is United States Navy warship. We are operating in accordance with international law in international waters. We will maintain our course and speed. It wasn't meant for the destroyer alone, it was for the entire Indo-Pacific region, for allies and adversaries alike. The U.S. Navy was reaffirming the principle of freedom of navigation operations, a cornerstone of its maritime strategy. At the same time, aboard the Chinese vessel, the political calculus was shifting. Engaging now would mean global headlines about reckless escalation. Standing down could be spun domestically as a measured act of responsibility. Phase 11. The long game. By 7:20 a.m., the Antietam's sensors picked up a retreat vector from the corvettes. The destroyer held position for another 5 minutes, as if weighing pride against prudence, before beginning a slow turn back toward Chinese-claimed waters. This was not a surrender, it was a strategic pause. For Beijing, every such encounter is part of a long-term campaign to normalize aggressive posturing. For Washington, every such encounter is a test of resolve and readiness. And on this morning, the resolve had held without a single missile fired. Does true deterrence come from avoiding the trigger, or from showing you're willing to pull it? Was this U.S. Navy captain right to keep the guns cold, or should he have sent a sharper message? Tell us in the comments. And if you value analysis that cuts through the noise, hit subscribe because these waters will only get more dangerous. 7:28 a.m. Just as the USS Antietam began easing its formation back into a defensive patrol route, an alert tone split the air inside the Combat Information Center. This wasn't a standard radar contact, it was an encrypted flash priority message from U.S. 7th Fleet Command in Yokosuka. The content was short but explosive. Unidentified high-speed surface contact detected. Origin: submerged launch, 70 nautical miles east. Every officer in the room knew what that meant. Somewhere beyond the horizon, a Chinese submarine had just deployed an unmanned surface vehicle, a fast, low-profile craft capable of carrying reconnaissance gear or even anti-ship payloads. Phase 12, the Phantom Weapon. 7:30 a.m. Overhead, the E-2D Hawkeye slewed its radar to lock on to the contact, while one of the F/A-18E Super Hornets peeled off to investigate. Moments later, the pilot's voice crackled over comms. Visual on the contact, small, low profile. No visible armament, but running hot and fast toward our formation. This was the twist no one on the bridge had expected. It wasn't the destroyer or the corvettes making a move, it was a covert, long-range play to test the Navy's reaction time and rules of engagement. Phase 13. The Decoy Dilemma. Electronic warfare analysis came back fast. The drone boat was broadcasting a noisy radar signature, likely to trigger defensive systems. But the real threat could be behind it, a torpedo or missile launch, masked by the drone's approach. The captain faced an instant decision: engage the drone and risk escalation, or hold fire and risk letting an unknown payload into close range. At 7:33 a.m., he made his call. Deploy Seahawk. I want eyes and sonar on that sub before we even think about lighting up this drone. From the Antietam's flight deck, an MH-60R Seahawk lifted off, dipping low over the waves before extending a towed sonar array. Phase 14. The real play revealed. 7:36 a.m. The Seahawk's sonar operator reported contact, confirmed submarine signature, closing in from the southeast. The drone wasn't the weapon, it was the bait. Within seconds, the Rafael Peralta lit up its SQS-53 sonar, triangulating the sub's position. A message went out to the Chinese destroyer on a direct frequency: "We are tracking your submarine. Any hostile action will be met with immediate defensive response. The destroyer's reply? Silence. But its course altered again, this time back toward the submarine's location, an unmistakable signal that the plan had just been caught in the act. Phase 15. The quiet victory. 7:40 a.m. The drone cut speed and turned away. The submarine's signature faded as it retreated, and the Chinese formation continued its slow withdrawal. To the public, no missiles had flown, no guns had fired. But in the classified after-action reports, this would be noted as a successful detection and deterrence of a covert undersea approach, a scenario most navies train for, but few execute flawlessly under live conditions. Was this restraint the mark of a disciplined superpower, or did it give Beijing a green light to keep pushing the envelope? Drop your take below. This confrontation in the South China Sea was more than a tense morning standoff. It was a live demonstration of the U.S. Navy's layered deterrence in the Indo-Pacific. The USS Antietam and her accompanying strike group proved that American doctrine isn't built solely on firepower. It's built on integration, coordination, and escalation control. From a strategic perspective, three key takeaways emerged. Layered defense works under pressure. Surface combatants, air assets, and electronic warfare units operated as a single organism. The seamless use of the Aegis Combat System, EA 18-gram Growler jamming, and MH-60R Seahawk anti-submarine warfare capability neutralized both overt and covert threats without firing a shot. This reinforced U.S. and allied confidence in real-time multi-domain integration, deterrence without destabilization. The encounter reaffirmed Washington's commitment to freedom of navigation operations while avoiding an immediate spiral into armed conflict. The U.S.? Captain's restraint demonstrated a mastery of strategic patience, forcing the plan to step back without providing them a propaganda victory. Message to allies and adversaries alike. For allies like Japan, Australia, and the Philippines, this incident served as visible proof that U.S. forces are ready to protect shared maritime rights. For Beijing, it was a clear reminder that American resolve is matched by operational sophistication. Any aggressive move will be countered across multiple domains, from the surface to the seabed to the electromagnetic spectrum. Politically, this engagement will ripple through regional security talks. Allies will likely push for expanded joint patrols, while adversaries may double down on asymmetric tactics, cyber interference, unmanned swarm deployments, and gray zone maneuvers. The U.S. response suggests it's ready for all three, yet the most profound consequence is psychological. Deterrence isn't about sinking ships, it's about controlling the opponent's decision-making process. On this morning, the plan captain was forced to adapt to U.S. terms at every turn. That's the invisible currency of naval power. Do you believe the Indo-Pacific can stay stable through this kind of calculated deterrence? Or will repeated encounters eventually push both sides past the point of restraint? By the time the USS Antietam resumed her steady patrol, the sea looked as if nothing had happened. But beneath that calm surface, the morning's events had carved deep ripples into the strategic landscape of the Indo-Pacific. This was not merely a close pass between two warships, it was a reminder of why maritime supremacy still shapes the balance of power in the 21st century. For centuries, the world's great powers have known that oceans are not just vast stretches of water, they are highways of influence, arteries of trade, and in times of crisis, battlefields where national survival can be decided in minutes. On this morning, the U.S. Navy didn't just defend a ship, it defended an idea that freedom of the seas is not negotiable. The lesson was clear. Strength deters chaos. When the Antietam's Aegis system locked on to the Chinese destroyer, when F/A-18 seconds streaked across the sky, and when a hidden submarine was detected and shadowed without firing a shot that was more than tactical skill, it was the embodiment of a doctrine that says power must be ready, precise, and disciplined. The cost of that readiness is immense. Billions in shipbuilding, thousands of hours in joint exercises, years of honing interoperability between surface, air, and undersea assets. And yet, without it, the cost of losing credibility, and with it, the stability of entire regions would be far greater. This is why encounters like today matter beyond the headlines. They shape the calculations of not only adversaries but also allies who look to the United States for assurance that freedom of navigation, open trade routes, and collective security commitments still have teeth. The danger is real. Every standoff is a coin toss between de-escalation and miscalculation. The restraint shown today kept the peace, but tomorrow's scenario might not allow for the same measured response. That's why deterrence must be backed not only by words, but by the constant presence of capable forces in contested waters. Your voice matters here. Do you believe peace in the Indo-Pacific will be preserved by strength and presence, or are we drifting toward an inevitable confrontation? This debate isn't for the policymakers alone, it's for all of us who understand what's at stake when freedom of the seas is tested. History will remember moments like this not for the shots fired, but for the ones that didn't need to be. The quiet victories, the unseen deterrence, the moments when discipline outweighed impulse, these are the foundations of lasting stability. If you believe that truth should be told clearly, without spin, then stay with us. Subscribe, comment, and share your view. Because history is being written not just in Washington or Beijing, but out there on the open sea, where power, principle, and patience meet. Peace demands power, and power demands that we pay attention.